Hi, this is Kokuu, and I just wanted to provide an introduction to my YouTube channel and to the Zen audio project I've been undertaking, which is mainly to record all of the fascicles of Eihei Dogen's Shobogenzo. Um, what I want to do is just explain how this project came about and a little bit about how to understand Dogen. So, most of you here probably know who Dogen is, but if not, I'll explain a little bit later. Firstly, the initial spark for this project came 7 or 8 years ago when a member of my Zen community was spending their last days in a hospice, and she asked to have some Dharma to listen to during her final days. For that, I recorded the Diamond Sutra and a couple of other pieces. And I realized that probably others could benefit from hearing recordings of the Dharma, especially Zen teachings. I myself have a chronic illness and I use audiobooks a lot, and I know lots of other people with chronic illness use audiobooks because they cannot always physically read. And there's other people in the Buddhist community who have visual impairments or other reasons why they prefer audio recordings to books. During the time I've been doing this, I also discovered that it wasn't an original thought and that there are other YouTube channels and other people who are doing the same, making audio recordings of Buddhists and Zen teachings. And one of those channels is Dharmachakra, which specializes in recording Mahayana Buddhist sutras. And I collaborated with them a couple of years ago on Red Pine, Bill Porter's translation of the Lankavatara Sutra with his permission. And that is also on my channel. It was recorded with my friend John, who did the main text, and I did the verses which go along with that. My main project, though, has been to record these 95 or 96 fascicles of Shobogenzo, which roughly translates as the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, which was written by the Japanese monk Eihei Dogen, who's the founder of Japanese Soto Zen, and he lived in the first half of the 13th century in Japan. And he wrote the Shobogenzo, or the fascicles, which are like chapters of the Shobogenzo, between 1231 and his death in 1253. In fact, some of the fascicles remained unfinished on his death, or were only in first draft. And Dogen used to, probably like any of us who write, he liked to go back and edit his earlier work or his drafts until it got to a state where he thought they were completed. And some of these later drafts were just that. They were just first drafts. And after his death, they were found by his student Eido, who wrote them up into the form they are now, recognizing that if Dogen had lived for longer, he probably would have edited those himself, and the form of them would have changed. Originally, it seems that Dogen wanted to write 100 fascicles, but on his death, there were 95, I guess. Now, when we have translations of Shobogenzo, there's about 95 or 96, some of which weren't originally considered part of Shobogenzo. But we've got in the translation I'm using, there's 96 fascicles, there's 95, and then another included in the appendix, or another two included in the appendix. And those are listed in chronological order. What actually happened during the lifetime of the Shobogenzo, and well, probably after the lifetime of the Shobogenzo being written, was it's been organized into many different formats, including 12 fascicle Shobogenzo, 28 fascicle, the 60 fascicle, and the 75 fascicle Shobogenzo. The academic and Dogen scholar Stephen Heine believes that the 75 fascicle Shobogenzo together with the 12 fascicle Shobogenzo is probably the most authentic to what Dogen was trying to portray. There are, I think, at the moment 5 extant English translations of Shobogenzo, including one by Soto Shu, who are the head organization of Soto Zen in Japan, who they organized a translation project. But the translation I've used is by Gudo Nishijima Roshi and his student Mike Chodo Cross, which appeared in 4 volumes published by Windbell. And the reason I'm using those translations is because Gudo Nishijima was the teacher of my teacher. So this is the version in my particular Zen lineage. And also those volumes are now available in a form in Creative Commons. But just to let you know that if you see versions that differ from the versions I've recorded here, there are other translations. I imagine those of you coming here are familiar with Dogen and his work. And if so, you'll know that Shobogenzo is an incredible work. It can be incredibly poetic, it can be incredibly inspiring. It can also be really frustrating. Dogen uses different techniques. I mean, remember, he's writing in 13th century Japan, so his writing style is going to be maybe different to what we're used to anyway. But he's writing in ways to try and get us to see how reality is and to express his views on Zen practice and Buddhism. So I have found myself that I've needed to read some commentaries and some books in order to help me understand Dogen better. I still don't consider myself anything of any kind of expert on Dogen, but I would say I understand him better than I did when I first started reading him. So I'd just like to introduce you to some of those books that I've found helpful. You may be aware of them already, but I'm going to introduce them to you anyway. So the first one is called Dogen, Japan's Original Zen Teacher by Stephen Heine. I've mentioned Stephen already. He's an American academic and Dogen scholar. And this book is like an overview of who Dogen was, his life, um, and how he came to arrive at his view of Zen and the Buddha Dharma and the original insights both the original insights he brought and what he took from what went before him, his teacher Ru Jing, and the Chan tradition that was already in China. So this is a really good book to get an overview of Dogen. And likewise, Stephen Heine's written another one. As I said, Treasury of the True Dharma. I is the translation or a translation of Shobogenzo. And this is an excellent overview to Shobogenzo in terms of what I've been saying about when it was written, the different collections and number of fascicle Shobogenzo they were, and just all kinds of information about Shobogenzo is in this book. It's a really valuable read, and Stephen is really reliable and knows his stuff. As far as Buddhist practitioners and Zen teachers go, um, possibly this book is the best on understanding Dogen. Genjokoan is the third chronological fascicle of Shobogenzo. If we include Bendowa, which is the first chronological fascicle, but probably wasn't originally part of Shobogenzo. Genjokoan is quite a short fascicle, but it was written to one of Dogen's lay students. And for me, it contains a whole um, a lot of important aspects of his teaching all in that one short fascicle. So by understanding Genjokoan, it's kind of like a kind of gateway into Dogen as a whole. So reading Shohaku Okumura's Realizing Genjokoan is very good. Shohaku Okumura himself is Japanese. He was the student of Koshi Uchiyama, another notable Japanese Zen teacher. And Shohaku Okumura founded and continues to run the Sanshin Zen Center in Bloomington, Indiana. And having said how good Shohaku Okumura is, another book on another Dogen fascicle, this time Sansui Gyo. I may be pronouncing that wrongly, my Japanese is not good. And that translates as the Mountains and Waters Sutra. And it's a very beautiful sutra. And by reading this book, you'll get to understand more about that sutra in particular, but also about Dogen in general, a bit like with Realizing Genjokoan. The next one, I will just tell you this is by my own Zen teacher, Genjokoan. But although, obviously I have some kind of relationship to this book, it's really good. What Jundo does is he provides a very good introduction to parts of Shobogenzo, some of the fascicles, particularly those that are associated with sitting zazen and the reality of practice and how we see practice through sitting zazen and ultimately coming to terms with the nature of life and reality. And the good thing about this book is, although he simplifies Dogen, he doesn't do so at the expense of the depth and profundity of Dogen. So, yeah, it's not too long. It's a really good book to read on Dogen. This next book is one I don't see many people talk about yet. It's a favorite of mine. It's Receiving the Marrow, Teachings on Dogen by Soto Zen Women Priests. And this is a number of modern day Western women priests. And if you know anything about Western Zen, you'll recognize a lot of these names: Shosan Victoria Austin, Jan Chosen Bays, Eido Francis Carney, who edits the volume, Josho Pat Phelan, Grace Jill Shirison. Grace Shirison wrote a great book called Zen Women, Jisho Warner. They all take a fascicle of Shobogenzo and give their commentary on it. And what's interesting in here is you get some fascicles like Udonge or Udambara Flower by Jan Chosen Bays, which is not one of the fascicles which is normally picked out of the 95, 96 fascicles. There's some that are considered more important or pivotal than others, and those are talked about most often. And it's nice to have some other fascicles talked about in there. And the next series of 3 books is by Brad Warner. I imagine most of you have heard of Brad. He's in my Zen lineage because his teacher Nishijima, who's one of the translators of Shobogenzo I use, is also the teacher of my teacher. So he wrote a series of books, Sit Down and Shut Up, Don't Be a Jerk, which is his rendering of a certain fascicle of Shobogenzo. And it came Beyond Zen. And most of you will probably know that Brad lived in Japan and worked for a Japanese monster movie company, which is why his books look like they do. And one great thing Brad does, in my eye, is you can feel in the books his love for Dogen and Soto Zen. And he takes the fascicles of Shobogenzo, or a number of fascicles, and translates them into modern English, often employing modern American idioms instead of the Japanese ones that Dogen uses. And that is a very good way of allowing us an entry point into Shobo Genzo and into Dogen. And I think it's really, really valuable. And I'm grateful to Brad for having written those books. And they're ones I turn to on particular fascicles to see what he's had to say. So anyway, as I say, those books aren't an exhaustive list. As you can imagine, there's many more in Japanese and there's even more in English. But the point of reading about Dogen, as well as reading or listening to these writings, is they're there to inform our practice. They're there to inspire our practice. They're there to be read and reread. Fascicles like Benduwa, Genjokoan, and Fukan Zazengi, I read over and over again and always find something new in there and something to inform and energize my practice. And this is why Dogen wrote them. We can read, there's nothing wrong with reading Dogen for academic process or academic reasons. But the reason Dogen wrote Shobogenzo was for, well, first of all, it was for everyone, it was for lay people, and then later it was more and more targeted at his monastic community. But Shobogenzo is there to, as I say, inform and inspire our practice. And they're the words of a realized Zen master explaining how reality is, how reality looks to him, and how we can practice to get to the same place. Um, so, welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy listening to this Dogen and to some other pieces I've recorded here. And yeah, thank you very much for stopping by. I really appreciate it.